You know how they say the smallest cracks can bring down the strongest walls? For 11 years, I truly believed my marriage was a fortress. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, a single tiny buzz from my husband's phone didn't just crack our foundation. It detonated a bomb I never saw coming, revealing a life built entirely on lies. My name is Ava Bennett, and until not too long ago, I genuinely believed I had it all. At 34, I was the chief financial officer for a prestigious luxury interior design firm in Seattle. High finance, with its relentless hours and crushing pressure, that was my world, and I navigated it with confidence, with success. I loved the precision of numbers, the satisfaction of a perfectly balanced budget, the challenge of forecasting and strategy. My career wasn't just a job. It was a huge part of who I was, something I'd built carefully, brick by brick. And then there was Ethan Bennett, my husband, my partner for 11 years, married for 8. We met when we were young. I was an ambitious intern. He was this charismatic junior marketing executive at the same company. His smile, it was irresistible. His energy, simply boundless. He just had this way of making ordinary things feel exciting, of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. Our courtship was a whirlwind of Seattle adventures, late-night talks over Puget Sound, rainy afternoons in Pike Place Market, ambitious hikes in the Cascades. We were young, full of hope, and so deeply in love. Or at least, that's what I believed with every part of me. As the years rolled by, our life had settled into this comfortable, seemingly predictable rhythm. We bought a beautiful craftsman house in a leafy Seattle suburb, you know, the kind with a wide front porch and a garden I dreamed of tending but hardly ever had time for. Weekends became a mix of social stuff, dinner parties with Ethan's colleagues, brunches with my own dwindling circle of friends, charity galas that, for him, were more about networking than actually giving back. We took these carefully planned vacations, skiing in Whistler, wine tasting in Napa, and this one unforgettable anniversary trip to Italy, where we renewed our vows in a tiny chapel overlooking the Amalfi Coast. On paper, it looked absolutely perfect, enviable even. I remember thinking how solid we were. 11 years, that's a significant stretch of time. It's a tapestry woven with shared memories, inside jokes, storms we'd weathered, and those quiet moments of just getting each other. Or, that's what I thought our tapestry was made of. I saw us as a power team, tackling life together. Ethan always seemed supportive of my career. He'd listen, nod, offer some vague words of encouragement when I talked about boardroom battles or quarterly reports. Looking back now, perhaps the listening was more superficial, the encouragement more automatic than truly genuine. But I was busy, driven, and perhaps I just didn't look closely enough. Maybe I simply saw what I wanted to see, a reflection of the commitment I felt so deeply. Our home was beautiful, filled with expensive art and designer furniture, a testament to my success, and I thought, our shared taste. But lately, it had begun to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a meticulously curated museum. Quiet. Far too quiet. The laughter that once filled the house in our early years had faded, replaced by the low drone of the TV or the tap-tap-tapping of keys on Ethan's laptop late into the night. I told myself it was just the pressure of our careers, the natural settling that happens in long-term relationships. This is just what comfortable looks like, I'd assure myself. This is stability. But this insidious feeling had started creeping in during the months before everything imploded. A subtle shift in how Ethan acted. He became more territorial with his phone. Suddenly, it was either fused to his hand or conspicuously tucked away. More late nights at the office. Vague excuses for his absence, a general air of distraction when I tried to connect. He'd always been social, but his social life seemed to increasingly exclude me. Networking events, he'd say, or client dinners. With my own demanding schedule, I often gave him the benefit of the doubt. It was easier than facing the alternative, the ugly thought that something was wrong. There were little things, almost too small to notice, a new cologne I didn't recognize, a sudden, almost obsessive interest in his appearance. He had this knack for deflecting questions about his day with a practiced ease that, in hindsight, screamed deception. I'd ask who he was texting, and he'd wave it off. Just work stuff. His eyes never quite meeting mine. The intimacy, both emotional and physical, had undeniably dwindled, but I'd rationalized it as stress, fatigue. We were both high achievers in tough fields. Ups and downs were normal, right? I now know these were the blaring alarms, the ones I'd repeatedly hit snooze on, again and again, clinging to this illusion of our unbreakable bond. My belief in our 11 years, in our marriage, was like a potent sedative. It kept the anxiety from bubbling up, allowing me to function, to excel at work, to keep up the facade of our perfect life. But deep down, a tiny seed of profound unease had been planted, and it was starting to sprout, relentlessly pushing its way through the carefully packed soil of my denial. The day my world tilted violently on its axis started like any other Tuesday. I had a marathon of back-to-back budget meetings, the kind that leave you mentally fried, but feeling like you've accomplished something. I remember feeling a small wave of relief as I drove home, actually looking forward to a quiet evening. Maybe Ethan and I could order takeout, uncork a bottle of wine, genuinely connect. I even picked up his favorite Pinot Noir on the way. Such ordinary, fragile hopes, looking back now. Ethan was home before me, which was unusual. He was in the kitchen, on a call, his back pointedly to me. He gave me a quick, distracted wave. I unpacked the groceries, the wine, the little bouquet of flowers I'd bought on a whim. The house felt still. Way too still. He ended his call with a hushed, "Okay, talk soon," in a tone that was just a little too smooth, a little too intimate for any business call. A tiny alarm bell, a faint yet familiar ping of unease, sounded in my head. I dismissed it. Again. He claimed he needed to run out for a bit, some forgotten work errand. He seemed jumpy, restless. He grabbed his keys, his wallet, and he left his phone on the kitchen counter. His phone. The device that was usually practically part of his hand. It just lay there, screen down. This silent, unassuming rectangle of glass and metal that held my future in its circuits. For a moment, I just stared at it. It felt utterly wrong, like seeing a soldier without his weapon. But this insidious feeling had started creeping in during the months before everything imploded. A subtle shift in how Ethan acted. He became more territorial with his phone. Suddenly, it was either fused to his hand or conspicuously tucked away. More late nights at the office. Vague excuses for his absence, a general air of distraction when I tried to connect. He'd always been social, but his social life seemed to increasingly exclude me. Networking events, he'd say, or client dinners. With my own demanding schedule, I often gave him the benefit of the doubt. It was easier than facing the alternative, the ugly thought that something was wrong. There were little things, almost too small to notice, a new cologne I didn't recognize, a sudden, almost obsessive interest in his appearance. He had this knack for deflecting questions about his day with a practiced ease that, in hindsight, screamed deception. I'd ask who he was texting, and he'd wave it off. Just work stuff. his eyes never quite meeting mine. The intimacy, both emotional and physical, had undeniably dwindled, but I'd rationalized it as stress, fatigue. We were both high achievers in tough fields. Ups and downs were normal, right? I now know these were the blaring alarms, the ones I'd repeatedly hit snooze on, again and again, clinging to this illusion of our unbreakable bond. My belief in our 11 years, in our marriage, was like a potent sedative. It kept the anxiety from bubbling up, allowing me to function, to excel at work, to keep up the facade of our perfect life. But deep down, a tiny seed of profound unease had been planted, and it was starting to sprout, relentlessly pushing its way through the carefully packed soil of my denial. The day my world tilted violently on its axis started like any other Tuesday. I had a marathon of back-to-back budget meetings, the kind that leave you mentally fried, but feeling like you've accomplished something. I remember feeling a small wave of relief as I drove home, actually looking forward to a quiet evening. Maybe Ethan and I could order takeout, uncork a bottle of wine, genuinely connect. I even picked up his favorite Pinot Noir on the way. Such ordinary, fragile hopes, looking back now. Ethan was home before me, which was unusual. He was in the kitchen, on a call, his back pointedly to me. He gave me a quick, distracted wave. I unpacked the groceries, the wine, the little bouquet of flowers I'd bought on a whim. The house felt still. Way too still. He ended his call with a hushed, "Okay, talk soon," in a tone that was just a little too smooth, a little too intimate for any business call. A tiny alarm bell, a faint yet familiar ping of unease, sounded in my head. I dismissed it. Again. He claimed he needed to run out for a bit, some forgotten work errand. He seemed jumpy, restless. He grabbed his keys, his wallet, and he left his phone on the kitchen counter. His phone. The device that was usually practically part of his hand. It just lay there, screen down. This silent, unassuming rectangle of glass and metal that held my future in its circuits. For a moment, I just stared at it. It felt utterly wrong, like seeing a soldier without his weapon. I went about my routine, started making a salad, still clinging to that hope of our quiet evening. And then it happened. The buzz. A short, sharp vibration against the granite countertop. It wasn't my phone. It was Ethan's. I glanced over. The screen lit up, and there it was. A name I didn't recognize, Rachel Carter, followed by a message that seared itself onto my brain. Can't stop thinking about last weekend at the cabin, counting the minutes until I see you again. Love you. Time just fractured. The sounds of the kitchen, the hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, faded into this deafening, pulsating roar in my ears. My breath hitched. I read the message again and again. Last weekend at the cabin. We didn't own a cabin. Ethan had told me he was at a work conference in Portland last weekend. Love you? The words swam, mocking me from the screen. My first reaction? Sheer disbelief. Cold, stark denial. This had to be a colossal mistake, a wrong number, a prank. Anything but what it so clearly was. My hand, trembling uncontrollably, reached for the phone. I didn't even need a passcode. Ethan, in his sheer arrogance or perhaps just blatant carelessness, had never bothered to lock it from me. Ironic, isn't it? The CFO, the woman who dealt with intricate security protocols daily, and my own husband's life, was an open book I'd never even conceived of reading. My fingers, clumsy and utterly numb, tapped on the message thread. And there it was. Not just one message, but an entire damning river of them. Weeks, months of conversations, intimate exchanges, private jokes, plans meticulously made, plans secretly carried out. flirty banter that made my stomach physically churn, explicit details of their assignations, their stolen interludes, talk of us, of a shared future. Hidden beneath layers of fictitious work trips and late nights at the office was an entirely separate life Ethan was actively living. A life with Rachel Carter. The shock was like a physical assault. It ripped the air from my lungs. My legs felt weak, and I just sank onto a kitchen chair, the phone still clutched in my hand. I scrolled, like some horrified voyeur at the demolition of my own life. Each message was a fresh violation, each revelation a deeper, crueler twist of the knife. There were photos too, selfies of Ethan and this woman, Rachel, laughing, holding each other. One picture, in particular, is forever seared into my memory. Them, silhouetted against a vibrant sunset at a lakeside cabin. The cabin from the text. The cabin that was so obviously their sanctuary. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just some reckless fling. This was a full-blown relationship, an entrenched affair, deep, tangled, and filled with declarations of love. The work conference in Portland, the client dinners that stretched late into the night, the networking events on weekends, all lies. Every single one. 11 years of shared history, of what I genuinely believed was unshakable trust, crumbled into bitter dust in those few, devastating minutes. The man I thought I knew intimately, the life I thought we cherished. It was all an elaborate, carefully crafted illusion. And I, Ava Bennett, the accomplished CFO, the woman who prided herself on being perceptive and astute, had been played for an absolute fool. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever conceived. It was this visceral, tearing agony that erupted in my chest and radiated through every fibre of my being. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was my reality shattering, the complete obliteration of my past and my future as I knew them. Awful, vivid images started flooding my mind. Them together, his hands on her, his laughter, once mine, now shared with her. I felt this weird detachment, like I was watching this happen to someone else, a character in a tragic movie. Emotional numbness began to set in, my mind's desperate defense mechanism against the overwhelming, soul-crushing betrayal. My meticulously ordered world had been violently upended by a single text message on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same. The hours that followed are a blur of raw, wild emotion. Shock turned into this searing anger, then into a deep, hollow grief. I paced the beautiful, silent rooms of our house, rooms that now felt alien, contaminated. Every photograph, every shared object felt like a sick joke. That Pinot Noir I'd bought sat on the counter, a bitter reminder of my naive hopes for the evening. When Ethan came back, full of flimsy excuses for why he was late, I said nothing. I couldn't. The words were trapped in my throat, choked by a storm of conflicting emotions. How do you even talk to someone who's become a stranger overnight? He didn't notice my inner turmoil, or if he did, he conveniently chose to ignore it. He was too wrapped up in his own world, his own secrets. That night, I lay beside him in our bed, a chasm wider than the Grand Canyon separating us. Sleep was impossible. My mind raced, replaying the messages, the images, searching for clues I'd missed, kicking myself for being so blind. I was on constant high alert. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh from Ethan felt loaded with meaning. This, I'd later learn, is a very common trauma response when you discover infidelity indirectly, which often intensifies the distress. For days, I just drifted in a fog. I went to work, handled complex financial discussions, presented reports, all on autopilot. My colleagues, accustomed to my professional composure, didn't see a thing. But underneath, I was unraveling. The carefully constructed facade of Ava Bennett, unflappable CFO, was cracking. The betrayal wasn't merely emotional. It felt like a fundamental assault on my identity, my judgment, my very core. Who even was I, if not Ethan's devoted wife, his partner of 11 defining years? My first instinct was to confront him, to scream, to rage, to demand answers, but something held me back. Maybe it was the CFO in me, the part that instinctively values strategy over impulsive reactions. Or maybe it was a deeper, more primal need to understand the full extent of the deception before I blew things up. A direct confrontation, I sensed, would only unleash more lies, more practiced denials. He was good at that. I needed more than just his admission. I needed the truth, the entire, unvarnished, ugly truth. The name from the text message, Rachel Carter, kept reverberating in my mind. A quick, quiet search online during one sleepless night revealed who she was. Rachel Carter, a sales representative from Tacoma, also married. Her husband, Adam Carter, a respected local architect. My heart plunged even further. This wasn't just my life Ethan had decimated. He'd callously dragged others into his intricate web of deceit. Another family, another spouse, unknowingly living a lie. A strange, steely resolve began to form amidst the suffocating pain. I wasn't going to be a passive victim in this. I wouldn't let Ethan control the story. Finding out about the affair, as utterly devastating as it was, had also pierced me with this terrible, chilling clarity. All those nagging suspicions I'd harbored about Ethan's secretive behavior over the past few months suddenly clicked into place, forming a coherent, ugly picture. The late nights, the hushed phone calls, the emotional distance. They weren't in my head. They were evidence. Instead of an immediate, explosive confrontation with Ethan, I chose a drastically different path, a path of quiet, calculated determination. I needed an ally, and the only person who could truly comprehend the depth of this particular betrayal was Adam Carter, Rachel's unsuspecting husband. The thought of contacting him was terrifying. What if he already knew? What if he flatly didn't believe me? What if he accused me of trying to stir up trouble? But the alternative, facing this alone, letting Ethan and Rachel continue their charade, was unbearable. It took me a week to work up the courage. A week of living this agonizing double life myself, pretending everything was normal while my world was imploding. I found Adam Carter's professional contact details online. He worked for a well-regarded architectural firm in Tacoma. One afternoon, from the sanctuary of my office, my heart hammering against my ribs, I composed an email. It was brief, carefully worded, no drama. I introduced myself, succinctly explained my relationship to Ethan Bennett, and stated I needed to discuss something mutually critical and deeply sensitive about our spouses. I suggested a discreet meeting. Waiting for his reply was agony. Every email notification sent a jolt of anxiety through me. Finally, 2 days later, it arrived. Ms. Bennett, it read, your email was unexpected. I am available to meet. Please suggest a time and place. His tone was guarded, undeniably formal, but he hadn't dismissed me. That was enough. We arranged to meet at a quiet, neutral coffee shop halfway between Seattle and Tacoma. I remember rehearsing what I would say, how I'd present the evidence without sounding like a hysterical, accusing mess. When I saw him, he looked utterly lost. Tall, with a kind face now etched with profound worry. He was clearly as nervous as I was. I didn't waste time with small talk. I laid out the cold, hard facts, calmly, methodically, almost as if I were presenting a grim financial report. I showed him copies of the text messages, the dates, the times. I described what I'd found on Ethan's phone. As I spoke, I watched the dawning, sickening horror in Adam's eyes, that slow, painful recognition. It was like looking in a mirror of my own experience. He listened intently, his initial skepticism giving way to a grim understanding. He too had noticed unsettling changes in Rachel. More essential travel for work, a new, almost compulsive obsession with her phone, a growing emotional chasm between them. He'd chalked it up to stress, the demands of her sales job. Like me, he had been unknowingly coexisting with a lie. There was no dramatic outburst from Adam, just a quiet, soul-deep sadness. He confessed his own suspicions, those nagging doubts he'd tried to push down. Our conversation wasn't just about shared grief. It was about a shared, staggering bewilderment. How could the people we loved, the people we'd built lives with, be capable of such deep deception? By the end of our somber meeting, a grim alliance had been irrevocably forged. We were two unwilling detectives, brought together by our spouses' infidelity. We agreed that a simple, isolated confrontation wouldn't suffice. Ethan and Rachel needed to face not just us, but the full consequences of their actions, together. Adam told me about the lakeside cabin. It turned out Rachel had inherited it from a distant relative and had spun Adam a tale about it being too dilapidated to use, that she was planning to sell it. Another lie. It had become their secret haven. The irony was bitter. This cabin, the very stage of their clandestine romance, would now become the theatre for our reckoning. We decided to orchestrate a calm, face-to-face confrontation there. Not a screaming match, not some theatrical showdown, but a quiet, unyielding demand for truth. We needed to see them together, to hear their explanations, if any, without the buffer of distance or separate conversations. We needed to strip away the suffocating secrecy and expose the affair in the cold, unforgiving light of day, in the very place it had thrived. Planning this, focusing on the stark logistics, gave me a strange, temporary sense of purpose, a temporary break from the crushing weight of the emotional fallout. It was a small bit of control in a situation where I felt utterly powerless. We were heading right into the eye of the storm. If this story is resonating with you, or if you've ever faced a betrayal that cut this deep, perhaps consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Sometimes, sharing our stories is an incredibly powerful step towards healing. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever had that gut feeling, that intuitive nudge that something was seriously wrong? And crucially, did you listen to it? That Saturday dawned with a heavy, overcast sky, the weather a perfect mirror to the turmoil churning inside me. Adam and I had meticulously planned our arrival at the lakeside cabin. We knew from Rachel's fabricated calendar, which Adam still had access to, and Ethan's vague pronouncements about a necessary solo retreat to brainstorm a brilliant new marketing campaign, that they'd be there. The drive to the cabin, with Adam in his car following mine, was fraught and mostly silent. What were we going to find? How would they react? What new horrors were waiting for us? The cabin was nestled deep in the woods, utterly secluded and deceptively picturesque. A perfect clandestine love nest. As we pulled up the gravel driveway, I saw Ethan's car parked beside Rachel's. A fresh wave of nausea hit me. They were here, together, living their lie. Adam and I exchanged a look. No turning back now. We walked to the front door, the silence of the forest around us making my pounding heart sound even louder. Adam, his face a rigid mask of strained composure, used the key he knew Rachel kept cunningly hidden under a loose stone by the porch. He'd confessed that Rachel had told him years ago she'd misplaced the keys to this dilapidated old shack. More lies. The door creaked open, and we stepped inside. The scene that greeted us was one of nauseating domestic bliss. Ethan and Rachel were in the living room, a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table, soft music playing. They were laughing. Rachel nestled against Ethan on the sofa, his arm draped possessively around her. They looked comfortable, happy, completely oblivious. The sight of them, so utterly at ease in their betrayal, sent a shockwave of glacial fury straight through me. Our entrance was abrupt. Rachel looked up first, her casual smile freezing on her face as she saw Adam. Her eyes widened in raw panic, then darted frantically to me. Ethan followed her gaze, and every drop of colour just drained from his face. He shot up from the sofa, his expression a mix of disbelief and dawning horror. The cosy atmosphere shattered instantly, replaced by a thick, suffocating silence. Ava? Adam? What on earth are you doing here? Ethan stammered, his voice barely an audible whisper. I think the far more pertinent question, Ethan, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, betraying none of the violent tremor I felt inside, is what are you doing here? With her? Rachel just stared, speechless, her hand flying to her mouth. Adam moved to stand shoulder to shoulder beside me, his presence a powerful, silent reinforcement. He looked at Rachel, his disappointment a heavy weight in the room. Rachel? Care to explain? What followed wasn't the explosive, screaming match I'd half anticipated, but something far more chilling. A slow, agonizing, public unraveling. At first, there were denials, attempts to deflect. Ethan desperately tried to spin some fantastical story about an impromptu work meeting, a collaborative project. Rachel mumbled something about needing advice from a friend. Their lies were so transparently flimsy, so utterly pathetic with both of us standing there as living proof, that they sounded ridiculous even to their own ears. Enough, Adam interjected, his voice quiet but unyielding. We know, Rachel. We both know. About the affair. About this cabin. I watched Ethan. His usual suave, overconfident charade was gone, replaced by a desperate, almost feral, hunted look. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Ava, It's not what it looks like, he began, that classic, utterly hollow line of someone caught utterly red-handed. Isn't it, Ethan? I retorted, my voice laced with a profound bitterness I couldn't conceal. 11 years. 11 years I invested in you, trusted you implicitly. And for how long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to my face, day in and day out? The confrontation was brutally raw, painfully honest. Adam and I didn't so much accuse as we systematically stated facts, laying out the irrefutable evidence of their prolonged deceit. We talked about the text messages, the late nights, the made-up business trips. With each damning revelation, Ethan and Rachel seemed to visibly shrink, the weight of their betrayal pressing down on them. But the blatant infidelity, as devastating as it was merely the visible tip of a colossal iceberg of deceit. As the carefully built walls of their secret life began to crumble, other truths started to come out, uglier and more complex. It turned out Ethan hadn't just been unfaithful emotionally and physically, he'd been financially deceptive too. Large sums of money, siphoned from our joint accounts, had been secretly funneled into this clandestine life. Expensive gifts for Rachel, weekends away, maintaining this cabin. As CFO of my company, I prided myself on financial smarts. Yet I'd been blind to him siphoning off my own money, our own security. The irony was a particularly cruel twist of the knife. He had exploited my unwavering trust in every conceivable way. Years of insidious emotional neglect and profound loneliness also came surging to the surface. I spoke of the loneliness I'd felt, the growing distance between us that I had tried so hard to bridge, only to be met with his indifference. Adam, too, voiced his own deep-seated hurt, the gnawing feeling of being taken for granted, of his own needs being ignored by Rachel while she carried on this affair. He talked about her escalating secrecy, her mounting irritability, the insidious way she had emotionally withdrawn from their marriage, leaving him feeling bewildered and utterly isolated. Then came the bombshell that utterly floored us all. Rachel, her face ghostly pale, tears streaming uncontrollably down her cheeks, looked at Adam and whispered hoarsely, "There's something else. Adam, I'm pregnant." The air just evacuated the room. I stared at her, then at Adam, whose face had gone ashen. Ethan looked completely shell-shocked, as if this was a shocking revelation to him too. For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was Rachel's quiet sobbing. Adam finally shattered the silence, his voice choked with a maelstrom of emotion. Is it mine, Rachel?" She nodded mutely, unable to meet his accusing eyes. "Yes, it's yours." Another layer of devastating complexity, another innocent life tragically caught in this toxic web of deceit. A child, an innocent child, conceived amidst lies and betrayal, now dragged into this mess. The affair wasn't just about 4 fractured adults anymore. It had consequences that would ripple out much further. The weight of it all felt unbearable. The confrontation lasted for hours. There were tears, accusations, moments of stunned silence, and halting, painful admissions. Ethan, stripped bare of his usual bravado, finally admitted to the affair, to the intricate lies, to the staggering financial misconduct. He feebly tried to offer explanations, feeling suffocated, craving excitement, making a terrible mistake. But his words sounded hollow, self-serving. He talked about pressures I never knew he felt, insecurities he'd hidden behind his charm. It was a disturbing picture of a man I didn't recognize, a man who had consistently chosen deception over dialogue, betrayal over unwavering loyalty. Rachel, similarly, confessed to her unhappiness, to feeling unseen by Adam, to looking for validation somewhere else. Their justifications, however articulate, did little to diminish the widespread devastation they'd unleashed. They had made choices, deliberate choices, that had shattered 4 lives and were about to impact a 5th. By the time Adam and I finally walked away from the cabin, I was exhausted to my very core. But amidst the searing pain, there was also a nascent flicker of something else, a grim, undeniable sense of clarity. The truth, in all its raw, painful, unvarnished detail, was irrevocably out. No more shadows, no more whispered secrets. The full extent of Ethan's betrayal, emotional, physical, financial, was laid bare. The affair was one thing, but the calculated deception, the years of emotional neglect he now admitted to, the systematic draining of our shared resources for his secret life, that was a far deeper wound. There was no going back from this. The fortress I once believed was our marriage hadn't just been cracked. It had been utterly obliterated. And standing there, amidst the smoking ruins, I knew with absolute certainty I had to walk away. The immediate aftermath of that confrontation at the lake house was a period of profound confusion and exceptionally painful decisions. Driving away from that toxic cabin, leaving Ethan and Rachel to face the mess they'd made, I felt this bewildering mix of vast emptiness and steely resolve. The truth, as agonizing as it was to dig up, had also been liberating. The charade was definitively over. Back in Seattle, the beautiful craftsman house Ethan and I had meticulously built our life in felt cold, hollow, and alien. It wasn't a cherished home anymore, but a haunting museum of a life that had been an elaborate lie. Every object, every photograph seemed to whisper of his betrayal. I couldn't stay there. That very night, I packed a bag and checked into a hotel. I needed space, needed to get away from those suffocating memories. My decision to terminate the marriage was swift, unequivocal, and absolute. There was no conceivable room for doubt, no possible space for forgiveness, not after the staggering depth of deceit I'd unearthed. It wasn't just the affair with Rachel. It was the corrosive years of emotional neglect, the calculated financial infidelity, the profound, almost sociopathic disrespect Ethan had shown for me, for our vows, for our entire shared history. Love alone, I now understood with painful clarity, simply can't sustain a relationship without a bedrock foundation of trust, mutual respect, and unwavering honesty. And Ethan had systematically demolished that foundation. The days that followed were a maelstrom of practical necessities and intense emotional turmoil. I contacted a formidable lawyer, a no-nonsense woman renowned for specializing in complex, high-stakes divorce cases. As a CFO, I inherently understood the critical importance of meticulous preparation, and I approached my divorce with the same unwavering strategic mindset I brought to my demanding career. I meticulously gathered financial statements, painstakingly documented Ethan's damning admissions of financial wrongdoing, and prepared to untangle our deeply intertwined assets. It was a grim, soul-crushing process, dissecting a life we'd painstakingly built together, but it was also strangely empowering. I was reclaiming control, vehemently refusing to remain a passive victim of his destructive choices any longer. Telling my beloved family and closest friends was incredibly tough. There was profound shock, righteous anger on my behalf, and overwhelming offers of support, for which I was immeasurably grateful. But there was also that insidious sense of shame, a gnawing feeling that I had failed, that I had been unpardonably naive. It's a shockingly common feeling for people who've been so deeply betrayed, that agonizingly misplaced guilt, the relentless self-blame. Logically, I knew unequivocally that Ethan was solely responsible for his despicable actions, but emotionally, it was an arduous struggle to shake off the suffocating feeling that I should have known, should have seen the glaring signs. Ethan's reaction to the divorce proceedings was initially stunned disbelief, then a torrent of pathetic, self-serving pleading. He desperately tried to reconcile, offering apologies that felt insultingly hollow and entirely self-focused. He talked about making a mistake, about not knowing what he had until it was gone. But the trust was just gone, shattered. His words meant absolutely nothing against the crushing weight of his actions. I stood firm. My hard-won self-respect demanded it. Discovering infidelity, especially with the devastating indirectness I experienced, accidentally unearthing a long-term, deeply entrenched clandestine affair, can indeed trigger symptoms akin to PTSD. I was plagued by intrusive thoughts, vividly replaying scenes from his messages, imagining him with Rachel in graphic detail. Sleep became a rare luxury, and when it infrequently did come, it was often shattered by violent nightmares. My anxiety levels were perpetually sky-high, and a persistent, heavy sadness clung to me like an oppressive shadow. My work, usually a sanctuary of comfort and predictable stability, became an uphill battle. Trying to concentrate on complex financial models was nearly impossible when my mind was a relentless battlefield of searing betrayal and profound grief. I recognized these debilitating signs. I later learned this was an almost universal emotional consequence. During this turbulent time, Adam Carter and I maintained cautious, infrequent contact. We were inextricably bound by a shared, profound trauma, a unique, unspoken understanding of what the other was enduring. He was courageously navigating his own extraordinarily complex situation with Rachel, made infinitely more complicated by her pregnancy. He, too, had resolutely decided to end his marriage. Their path was undeniably filled with its own formidable challenges, figuring out how to co-parent amicably, how to somehow move forward with the ominous shadow of the affair looming over them. Our conversations were never about romance. The very thought was deeply repulsive to both of us, but about crucial mutual support, a quiet, heartfelt acknowledgement of the parallel, agonizing paths our lives had violently taken. My unlikely friendship with Adam Carter evolved into something exceptionally rare and incredibly precious. We maintained sporadic contact, occasional calls, infrequent emails. There was absolutely no romance, nor would there ever be. That was an unspoken, mutual understanding. We were two resilient survivors, indelibly bonded by a shared, devastating shipwreck, offering each other profound understanding and unwavering support from a safe, respectful distance. He was admirably navigating the complexities of fatherhood, co-parenting with Rachel as best he could, and painstakingly building his own new life from the ground up. Their journey was undeniably complicated, but he was facing it with a quiet, steadfast dignity that I truly, deeply admired. Our connection was a poignant testament to the unexpected, often miraculous ways healing can manifest, a vital reminder that even in the absolute darkest of times, genuine human connection can be an indispensable lifeline. Over considerable time, the sharp, jagged edges of the pain began to noticeably soften. The awful, tormenting, intrusive thoughts became blessedly less frequent. The draining, hyper-alertness gradually eased. I started to joyfully rediscover parts of myself I'd unknowingly lost or suppressed during my suffocating marriage. My love for painting, for long walks in nature, for quiet solitude. I made wonderful new friends in my welcoming coastal town, people who knew me simply as Ava, the strong, independent woman by the sea, not Ava, the scorned, betrayed wife. Looking back, the woman who received that single, devastating text message feels like an entirely different person from a lifetime ago. The betrayal was an undeniable crucible, a terrifying, fiery ordeal that mercilessly stripped away everything I once naively thought was real and true. But in doing so, it also powerfully forced me to confront my own deep-seated strength, my own astonishing resilience. It taught me the absolutely profound importance of inviolable self-worth, the critical necessity of valuing yourself above any relationship, no matter how long its tenure. It hammered home with brutal clarity that love, without unwavering honesty and profound respect, is nothing more than a fragile, dangerous illusion. My arduous journey from that shocking, world-altering discovery on Ethan's phone to the profound peace I now cherish in my coastal cottage was incredibly, indescribably hard. It was a path relentlessly paved with oceans of tears, consuming anger, and painstaking, often agonizing self-reflection. But it was also, ultimately, a journey towards unwavering authenticity, towards a life lived entirely on my own terms, a life infinitely richer and more genuinely fulfilling than the hollow one I had before. Ethan and Rachel? I heard through the distant grapevine they didn't last. Their relationship, predictably built on a treacherous foundation of lies and corrosive secrets, inevitably, spectacularly crumbled under its own considerable weight. Their sordid story is just a forgotten footnote in mine. The experience taught me that genuine forgiveness is a complex, deeply personal, and often lengthy journey. For some, it might ultimately mean reconciling with the person who inflicted such deep hurt. For me, Forgiveness meant consciously releasing the corrosive bitterness, intentionally letting go of the consuming anger that bound me so tightly to the painful past, and most critically, forgiving myself for not seeing what was so skillfully hidden in plain sight. Walking away, decisively and permanently, was my ultimate act of forgiveness, forgiving the entire devastating situation enough to no longer allow it to cruelly define me or my future. My story is one of profound betrayal, yes, but it's also, more importantly, a story of powerful rebirth. It's irrefutable proof that even when your entire world is violently shattered into a million pieces, you possess the innate power to painstakingly pick up those pieces and build something entirely new, something infinitely stronger, something authentically you. The discovery on Ethan's phone exposed a chilling secret life of calculated lies, but it also, paradoxically, exposed my own immense capacity for profound resilience, for deep healing, and for consciously creating a life brimming with genuine peace, unwavering purpose, and ultimately, joy. If you were in my shoes, confronted with such a soul-crushing betrayal, what would you honestly do? Would you attempt to forgive and painstakingly try to rebuild? Or would you, like me, choose to walk away to save yourself? There's no single right or wrong answer, only the unique path that honors your own inviolable truth and non-negotiable self-worth. My story is intended as a stark reminder that sometimes the bravest, most courageous, and most profoundly empowering thing we can possibly do is choose ourselves, especially when it's the hardest, most terrifying choice to make. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it touched you or resonated deeply, please consider sharing it with someone who might truly need to hear it today. Don't forget to subscribe for more authentic stories of human resilience and profound transformation. What was the single biggest lesson you personally took from my experience? I'd genuinely love to know. Let me know in the comments below.